heard good things and I've heard horror stories. Audit and compliance may not work in your favor of moving the tactical agenda forward. In fact, you may be the one to help the business line with audit or with compliance. On the flip side, I've got a great audit, great compliance, leadership. So they've absolutely been helpful in my current role.
Well, I think it's like one of the first key questions: are they helpful or not? Like as you're starting to prepare and go out and meet people, is this an issue?
That's part of the discovery process.
Part of the discovery process.
Yeah, John. I mean, well, and when you talk about audit and compliance and compliance officer and stuff, what we find is that a lot of times auditors don't understand. Take Dr. Lang this morning. Said developers don't understand secure code. Well, how many auditors actually understand? I mean, yes, they take the.
There's one in New Jersey.
Yeah, exactly. So
Bill. For the record, Bill.
So when we look at it, audit honestly is not a consideration because we know at some point we're going to have to educate them on what they should be looking for. Because otherwise, I think it will more or less get in the way of what we're trying to do. So yeah, that's why they're not part of what we do. But what we kind of did was kind of did the stakeholder analysis. So we would understand our audience, so we could essentially align ourselves so that when it came time to roll out and deploy this overall, we call it product risk management for the enterprise. We dubbed it Prime. We gave it a name. We gave it a face. And that's how we're deploying it so that they understand it is about risk management. So you notice there's not the word security in there at all. It's about risk management. And to your point is they do understand risk. That is the topic of the day.
That's right.
Right. In the public sector, Richard, how is that different or better or worse or harder?
One thing on some of your great comments, you forgot layer 10, which is religion. You got to address that. No, but I focused a lot of my efforts on the head of application development. There's an enterprise application development team, and clearly I wasn't going in there and saying, hey, you're not, everything that was said at the keynote this morning is true for us, by the way. I won't give you our IP addresses, but the bottom line is I have to influence them somehow. So I attended their meetings, he allowed me to go in there. Half of it was up here, which is fine, but I got to see their interactions, they have good intentions, but security is down here on importance. It's all about giving the client all the tools that they want, all the functionality, and security is, they swore they're secure. Well, of course, we did some testing later, they weren't quite as much.
Because businesses, not.
Yes, exactly. No, but it's just not there on their radar for them. So by my attending the meetings and getting comfortable with them, and they're getting comfortable with me, am I not screaming and being a security cop, but just being a partner, that goes a long way. So much of that about is perception. On the other side of it, we talked about 3 layers deep and out, all different directions. Yeah, you have to know everyone who's a stakeholder. You got to know audit, whether you want to or not. You got to go pay them a visit and shake hands and introduce yourself and just try to stay on the same page. And be supportive to everyone as much as possible. Pick your battles. In public health, we have an interesting situation where we have 17 independent programs where there's a program director, which is like a mini CEO, and reporting to that CEO type is an IT director. So we're just now approaching a federated model. So we have a centralized we have a centralized security person, and we have centralized CIO, but there's no direct reporting. So they're out there doing their own thing, and it's my role to reach out. So I started having monthly security meetings, really forcing a security liaison to be created at each of the programs, and I hold meetings. I'm in public sector, so lunch budget, that's a joke. So instead, I reached out to partners, and I'll be talking to you after this. I have vendors coming in doing lunch and learns on security topics. So they start off, then they leave, and then I have my 2 hours of security meeting, internal. And it took years to gain the trust of all these different people to see, because they thought, oh, this is another guy who's going to give us more assignments to do, who's going to influence. They're not evaluating me for my performance. I don't have any direct relations, all dotted line. So there had to be a lot of, what can I do for you, right? Because nobody will ever listen to you unless they just happen to have incredible and testable fortitude, unless there's something in it for them. So we would go out and we'd help them with their policies and procedures, didn't point fingers, and we're here to help. unlike the auditor who really invented it.
But auditors are there to help report directly to the board of directors. I think that I disagree with the comment that auditors can be used or leveraged in a way that they're there looking after the business, reporting to the board, and with either guidance and education, they can help you with your strategy and your program by pointing out deficiencies in your organization. If they're looked upon as third-party auditors that are bad guys, don't tell them what they want, don't give them what they want, that's not really the conducive to the overall relationship of making it work.
I can't disagree with you, but I'm telling you, in fact, the reality of the perceptions.
Yeah. Well, that's a perception.
And I think the key takeaway from this discussion is the fact that as part of the discovery, where does audit fit? Ally? Do we bring them along later on? Do we, switch them? And I've been in client environments where they say, here's an audit opinion. They walk around as if it were, 10 commandments or whatever. Like, hey, look. One of the interesting things I also want to pass on is that we've seen, you talked about the lunch and learn things, we've seen clients that have gone around to the 45 dev teams and done lunch and learns to find out who were the dev leads or managers who had an affinity for security. So they would go and use it to smoke out those people that were the likely ombudsman for those 45 groups. And which is a different version of that, but just to go, because if you can't be everywhere at once, and you want to find, hey, you've got to call Iowa and call that dev team, you may not, you can talk to the dev leader, dev manager one way, but you want to find that belly button, that focal point. So that's interesting. I want to switch it a little bit and talk about the program itself. We talked about this earlier individually, but again, short of a breach, what are some of the kind of compliance frameworks that you use, if any? I mean, there's PCI, that's an obvious one, but what are the other hammers, if you have hammers, that you've been able to use? High trust is starting to come for more of the health side of the house than HIPAA was. And then I would throw in there, how do you interpret headlines that come out that are, tell me how you tell those stories. So two-phase question. I'll start with John.
Yeah, so from a framework perspective, I would say we probably lean more on ISO 27001, 27002. And we actually have some of our product teams that are looking to be certified on ISO 27001.
How many people have gone down that path, audience-wise? Quick set of hands. 3, 4, 3. Interesting. Okay.
Which, and I have an appreciation for what 27002 provides in terms of guidance for how you implement an information security management system. So that certainly helped the conversation. But, it was really, we took that and built our own framework, our own product risk management framework. And then we built within that, kind of an integrated risk and control assessment program, a policy management portal, and a risk management dashboard, and all this stuff, so that, because metrics become, a key indicator of what is going on. So, okay, so fine, you've got them to agree to adopt this program, but now, okay, how do you monitor and manage that? I mean, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. Yeah, exactly. So, but they're made aware that, while I operate in an influence model, there's an invisible hand that will look at this data and go, well, you know what? We're going to help you move this needle. You don't get to sit there and do nothing about it.
And from the product standpoint, that's somewhat unique. Tom, how about yourself? What do you see in client environments?
So my focal point is around FISMA, and obviously PCI apply. That's what our risk is, more money is, right? So government organizations have, FISMA as kind of a minimum bar they're trying to meet and comply with. And the PCI stuff, again, is a bar they're trying to make sure that they're going to do. So those are my areas of background. That HIPAA healthcare stuff is not exactly my forte.
Richard, is it all about HIPAA and high tech?
It's all about HIPAA. It's all about high tech, which give a little more teeth to HIPAA. Clearly, neither of those are very prescriptive, right? They're generalized, say that we don't have the luxury of PCI or the fear of PCI or whatever. But I try to come up with solutions for the people to implement. There's a disconnect I see with IT, a lot of it, with policy and the procedure, the implementation. They clearly understand both, but then you say, okay, how are we meeting these policies? And they're struggling. So a lot of it, I look at it as education. So we would go out and visit all these programs I mentioned earlier and work with them on what their policy and procedure would identify the gaps, do our own gap analysis. Yes?
Oh, I have a question. I apologize to interrupt you. You mentioned, Mr. Saxo, you mentioned metrics. One time I got a question, somebody asked me a great question, and I searched for years and I never find it. I was trying to talk to a CISO, and the CISO came to me and said, okay, I'm a new CISO here on the block. I just came on board. I'm fully aware of IT security. Now, I got to go talk to the CIO. When I went and talked to my CIO said, okay, I understand you're going to spend all this money. What is my return on investment? What is my ROI? How do I measure the investment, the return on my investment? How do you answer that question? So my CISO came back to me and said, okay, tell me, how do I answer this question? Can somebody tell me that?
What's the loss? What's the potential loss of not doing
well,
that?
the only potential, if you mention potential loss, then all you're doing is do a scare tactic.
I disagree. I think being able to quantify a situation for us to, if you don't do live, X will transpose. And I'll give you an example of that exact situation. Sitting in front of, I used to work for a bank a long time ago, sitting in front of the people that own the bank, explaining to them SEC regulations require broker-dealer communication to be archived out to the third party, right? To have an institution. The question was put forth to me was, what's the solution? Cost $275,000. What's the fine? $250. They'll pay the fine. Next question. So that's all relative about the business as to what's the
there's a risk-reward factor there.
Right, exactly. But they haven't had a breach yet. So how am I supposed to go to them and say, in case if you have a breach, here's your loss? Well, how do I quantitate?
Well, I think so. So what you do there is you talk about, risk treatment, risk acceptance, or you can just be risk ignorant if you like. I think if you try to get into the ROI conversation, there is no return on that investment in terms of, the general concept around ROI. What there is there is a risk-reward balance. How much risk is he willing to take? And you outline it for him and say, okay, if you're willing to take the chance that this will never happen, well, you know what, then fine. You know what, you may win that bet. But if you lose that bet, here's what you also lose.
And talk to them in the terms that they're used to. Ask them if they have life insurance for their family, if they have health insurance for their family. If they do, then clearly they buy into the whole risk process and they're buying into this quote-unquote ROI. If they don't have insurance, well, they like to live dangerous.
Or you go full scope and you have your punch in the face, you determine if they can actually stand up, right? Which is going ahead and quantifying that if you've never had a breach, what does it take to actually have that replicated from a full scope pen test and have the organization identify where their treasure is and see if it can be captured. If it can be captured, you just quantify the difference as an issue, which would satisfy the requirement.
Let me throw it over to Ed, and then I'll take your question on the audience. But let's shift it a little bit. I mean, could your business do what you do without the security? I mean, the answer is no. I wouldn't at all.
No.
So, what if you want to characterize this as enablement stuff? What do you do that allows your business units to conduct business?
I'm going to hit a couple of things, pulling comment that you made starting off, that comment, and then that question. One is, if you are attempting, and this might sound like Jeff Foxworthy, if you're attempting to do this, you might be. The issue is, it shouldn't be a hammer. None of the frameworks, none of the regulatory requirements should be a hammer. And if it is a hammer, it shouldn't be in your hands. Leave that to audit, leave that to compliance. You're there to help enable. And if you're not there helping to enable, you're just one of the many people that are kicking me while I'm already down, and you're not helping me get up, and you're not helping me succeed. Two, the frameworks, well, let's go back to regulatory, GLBA, PCI, I affectionately call them all EIEIO. Okay? And the reason being is ultimately one of the things, if you're going to be successful in a role of trying to influence the organization overall, not just AppSec, but overall, is navigating that unified control framework that says if we're doing these 53 things, and maybe that's all we can focus on this year, is I'm addressing this with PCI and GLBA and EIEIO, guess what? That's a good bang for the buck. So, if we do these core things, I'm improving tactical security and making incremental progress towards compliance, because everyone has compliance gaps somewhere along the line once you hit scope, scale, or whatever else it is. As far as frameworks, you've got audit that's talking COSO. You've got some IT groups, especially if you've got multiple IT groups that maybe are talking IDLE, EIEIO, whatever you want to pronounce it as. Leverage all of those to your benefit. The issue is if everyone's trying to get in shape, I don't care if you're doing jujitsu,